Hello. In this video lecture, what I am going to do is to hit some of the high spots of getting started with the BSG game. And while we will have gone over this in class, there's some things that are a little bit, that can be a little bit confusing. And I thought allowing you to have this as a crutch, it would be helpful to you. So what we're going to be looking at here is some of the reports that we have available to us. So this it's very important that you scout out your competition and anticipate what the customers will do next, or the competitors will do next. Now, in the initial round or two, you don't really have any background at all on what the competition's ideas are. So you're going to be doing two trials. And in the first trial, you really have to fly blind. You have no idea what they're going to do. By the time you get those first results, you'll get a little bit of an idea. And so the second trial will allow you to move with a little bit more certainty. In both of those trials, however, what I want to encourage you to do is to try different kinds of things, even if they seem a little wacky, because in that way you can begin to see how the game responds to the decisions that you make. As you move forward in the game, when we get into the real game after the two trials, you'll find you're going to be able to look at the customer's responses and to counter their moves and boost your own performance. And within, say maybe 3 moves out of the 10 that you're going to have in the real game, you should really be able to understand exactly where your competitors are going. Now, you've got to have a good set of reports to work with, and the key tool that you have is the competitive efforts report. So here's how to get there. When you sign on to the game, and this should be the same screen that you get. I'm working from my teacher's screen, and sometimes don't get to see. And likewise, there's some things that you'll have that I won't be able to see. But this is the common report, the footwear industry report. And this is probably the place where you go right away when you get your decisions back, because it'll show the rankings of all the teams based on a couple of measures. And it shows you where you are for the current round. And of course, the ideal would be to be at 100%, and that's the weighted average score. And you can see that in this range of things, the scores ran from 108 for the current year down to 9. There is a game to date below that that shows where you stood overall. In this case, if I look up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, I'll see this is year 20. So this is after all 10 decisions are in for a particular industry. In this case, on the upper left-hand corner, it says that this was industry 87. Now, your industries for this round are going to be 98, 99, 100, 101, and 102. Representing just an increment of the industries each time a new game is played. This is a kind of fun to look at, but the real interesting part is going to be in the next report that's available, and that's the competitive intelligence, or in the competitive intelligence reports, one called comparative competitive efforts. This is where you'll spend most of the time doing analysis on your position in the game and on the game itself. So looking now at the average competitive efforts on the right-hand side, well, on the left-hand side of the screen, I should point out that's your navigation panel. That's where you're going to determine which reports you're going to be looking at. The right-hand side is the result. So we're looking at the comparative competitive efforts, and the report comes up. Now, you'll notice if we kind of walk around this, the figures here, you'll see over toward the right, it says North America. It says that this is a report for company A. It's year 18 in this case. And so this is well along in the game. This again, it happens to be for industry 87. And I just picked a couple of the historical numbers that I have from previous games and previous classes to look at as representative. Now, you have the ability to look at all 4 regions in which you're operating. You got North America, Europe, Africa, Asia Pacific, and Latin America. But I always go first to the North American market because it's the largest market for you. But you need to look at all 4. On this, you also have this done year by year, and I'd point out that in the top line to the right-hand side of the report where it says year 18, you can always get the drop-down menu and go back to year 10. And sometimes that's helpful because you can see what your decision-making, what your predecessor's decision-making was in year 10 when you had taken over the company to run it. And so it gives you an idea of where you stand. Now, when you all come to me with problems, what I'm going to do now is to go through the exercise of how I would diagnose the problems and give you advice as to what to do to cure them. In the actual report, it shows at the upper part of the report, each company within the industry is shown, and it goes from A to L. In this case, there was no Team K and no Team L. There were, however, 10 companies that were competing. The first section of the report is the internet segment. And this, of course, is the direct sales to end users. This had started out at about 15% of your total sales. And over time, it grows. Its pricing, the pricing that you use, is independent of the price that you use for the wholesale segment. And the wholesale segment is the second. Incidentally, the identifier on the left-hand side of the report is in green, and the internet section is the first section. The second section is the wholesale segment. The third segment, which does not show on this report just because there wasn't enough room, is the private label sector. By far, the most important segment for you is always going to be the wholesale segment. This is where you're pushing product to dealers or retail stores who in turn are moving your product to the end user. You obviously have a lot of leverage with them, and they have a lot of leverage with you as well, because they can always drop you as a supplier. What we want to be able to do is to keep as large a dealer organization as we can. Now, the first place I would go for diagnostic purposes is in the wholesale segment. And I would be looking at this line near the bottom that says gained or lost. And in this case, where the yellow marks are, it indicates that there was demand for your product, but you were unable to fulfill it because you did not have sufficient finished goods on hand to address that need. And that, of course, is a sin that you don't want to repeat. When we're out here at year 18, which is what the year is of the upper right-hand corner, you should really understand your market and know what the demand is and know what your supply is. And you should not be getting into any significant And by significant, I mean, say over a number over a yellow number over, say, 25 or 50. Not anything like the 300 and almost 600 that I have the red circle around on this report. You should be pretty close to being able to figure out where you stand. So the first thing I'd look at is why this negative number, why you had unfulfilled supply, where there was demand and you did not fulfill the supply for it. And this is particularly unpleasant because when you don't have a product available, what happens is you've spent all the money to advertise and promote your product, and the customer came into the dealer's location and said, I want to buy the Nikes, and the dealer had to tell them, or the retail store had to tell them, we don't have the Nikes, would you try the New Balance? So in effect, what you've done is generate traffic into that retailer store, but when you did not have your product on his shelf, he directed them to some other customer, or to some other supplier, because he does not want you to walk out without a pair of shoes. So in effect, what you're doing when you don't have sufficient supply on hand is you are helping promote your competitors' products. And this can be seen by going on that line that says gain or lost, all the way across to the far right-hand side where it says industry average. What the game does is it allocates your product based on the demand for your product until the value is zero. And if it goes negative, what it does is looks for other industry competitors who have a positive balance and applies the sales to their account. What we would expect to see is that the pluses and minuses going all the way from A to J would take you, would come out to exactly zero. That where you don't have product to supply the needs of your dealer, that the competitor would supply that need, and there would be a balance where all of the pluses would equal all the minuses. In this case, there was actually a demand for 14 or of product in excess of what the entire industry produced. Now, the second thing I look, so that's something that needs to be corrected. So the second thing I look at is these two numbers. In the wholesale segment, we have a price, and company I has a price of $72 that they sell to the dealer or retailer. The retailer in turn marks that up about 40%. And that'll be the price that he sells to his end user customers. Now, up at the top of the report, you see the circle around the internet segment, and there the price is $70. Now, ultimately, the retailer, when he sells it to his end user customers, is going to sell that product for probably about $110 a pair. But what we're doing is competing against him with a $70 pair. And that makes no sense. He won't stick with us. He'll go someplace else for his shoe supply. He does not want to be competing with the manufacturer of the product. So what we consistently have to do is make sure that our internet segment prices are about 40% higher than our wholesale prices, so that the retail store owner will have an opportunity to make an honest dollar as he sells to his customers. So in this case, this is horrible. If you look at the other places, the numbers will come out. If you look at any other company from A through H, you'll find that there is a significant price difference between the price at which we as manufacturers sell to our retailers, and the price that the internet segment has, allowing the dealer to mark up his product and still make a profit. Now, if that number turns out to be pretty close, that is that he's marking up 40 and you're still a dollar or two lower than he is, that's not going to bother him that much, because there's some people that prefer buying online. There are other people that want the experience of going in the store and checking things out by looking at all the inventory that's available in the store. But as long as that margin is close, everybody's happy. But it's when you begin to get a spread like you see in company I that the customers or the retailers are going to drop your line. The next thing I look at is what is the wholesale segment price? Are you competitive with your pricing? Now, in this case, there's a $48 wholesale price for company F. But if you look across from A all the way to J, you'll see that the prices are higher. And in fact, and if we go all the way over to the right, there's a light green bar, vertical bar that says industry average. And you can see the industry average price is $60.48. That's on this line, the line that is the first line under the wholesale segment that says wholesale price. That means that company F is well below the industry average. They have a relatively small market share. We can see that by going to the bottom of this report in column F. They have a 6% market share, and they could improve their market share. One way to do it is to, one way that they could gain, certainly gain more income, is to raise their wholesale price from 48 up to say maybe 57 or $58, where they're still cheaper than their competition. But obviously they're much healthier if they can get that extra $10 a pair. So you can see that they're well below that industry average. The next thing that I look at is retail outlets. And in addition to being a low price company, company F doesn't have many dealers. They have 590 dealers. Company G, right next to them, 541. But if we look at the guys that are really doing the job of building their dealership, company A has 5,000, almost 10 times as much as company F. Well, how did they get so many more dealers, and how did company F lose their dealers? Well, one of the ways is they do heavy retail support and heavy brand advertising, and they do have celebrity appeal. So again, looking at the wholesale segment, that portion of the report, let's go down line by line. Wholesale pricing, Team A is in pretty good shape. They've got a good price or above average, and they're still selling well. Their SQ rating, the second line, is very high. In fact, I think it's too high. Model availability, the third line, says that they've got lots of different products out in the market. I think they probably have too many. 450 indicates that the production department is having to make lots of changeovers on their equipment. Every time you have a different model style, you have to set up all your equipment to run that unique style. You're allowed to have between 50 and 500 in the game. And I suspect somewhere around 150 is probably the sweet spot. Production hates it when they got to do lots of changeovers because they end up with waste on every changeover. Sales likes to see up to 500 because that means they've got lots of different ways to reach the customer's needs. So there's a constant dynamic between those two, and you've got to find the sweet spot. As I said, I think it's probably around 150 to 200, maybe 150 to 250. By virtue of having the 450, Team A is, of course, really meeting a lot of the needs of the customers, but that may turn out that their bottom line is not as good as it could be because of the high cost of doing all the changeovers in the manufacturing. The fourth line item there is brand advertising. And it's essential that you keep kicking that up. This is one of the ways that you get dealers to want to do business with you. And Team A has been very, very aggressive with 30 million or 30,000, in keeping the, just eliminating some zeros, 30,000 in annual expenditures on brand advertising. Rebate offer is a little ticket that goes with the sale of the product that says if you come back in and buy again, we'll give you a $5 discount. I don't particularly think those are that hot because usually when you buy a pair of shoes, you're not going to go back within a couple of weeks and buy a second pair. And if you don't go back that way, what you find is that the ticket gets lost and you never redeem it. So it's a cheap way to give something to the customer, but the customer is really not going to take advantage of it, in my opinion. We're going to skip delivery time for right now, but go to the next thing is dealer support. The Team A has done a pretty good job with that. Team F, the one that has the problem with the low price, is doing a reasonably good job as well. Now, what is retailer support? This is maybe giving some money directly to the retail dealer so he can run an advertisement in the local paper or can distribute flyers. It may be also that he'd use that for to sponsor a soccer team. And it could be providing some, maybe some corrugated stand-up things with the picture of Shaquille O'Neal or Michael Jordan on it that he can put up in his store. Also, another way of dealer support is to give him a discount on the shoes. If he buys, say, a gross of shoes, you'd give him an extra dozen or 2 dozen pairs. All of these things are different ways to reach that dealer and get his desire to do business with your company. The result of all of this is more retail outlets. You started off, I believe, with in North America with 3,000. And what you do in terms of retail support will increase that number or decrease it. But you can always go back and check out where you started by going up to the right-hand corner where it says year 18 and just pulling down year 10 and see how many dealers did we have at the beginning. And you could even trace that through year by year, what were our support expenditures and how did the dealers react. Celebrity appeal is extremely important and it gets very competitive to buy that. Your sweet spot is probably about 150 units. And I'm not going to go into how to do the buying of celebrity appeal in this lecture, but just be aware that that's where you want to be. You want to be continually buying and supporting those celebrities. Let's see, I think that's all I want to talk to on this report. But I want to take you to the bottom of it. Now, there is this report goes below the fold, and that's where the segment called private label comes in. And also what I call the bubble chart. And this shows for internet sales and for the wholesale segment. where each of the industry competitors is positioned both based on price and quality in the vertical and in breadth of product line between 50 and 500 on the product line breadth. And each of the bubbles, of course, represents one of the companies, but it also represents the size of their market. Finally, it shows where there's overlap between customers or between vendors. So company C and D in the wholesale segment has a certain amount of overlap. So that means that they're going to be competing head to head. However, they're not competing with company A directly. And company A has done exceedingly well, finding a position where their SQ rating and quality is fairly high. And at the same time, their product offering is broad. Now, I think it's company I is really in deep trouble. They have no market share. They're in a place where they're by themselves, but they're just not selling any product. And it is looking at the composition of their competitive offering that determines how much they're going to sell. So I always find it's an interesting report to look at. And I'm going to go forward one slide and then back one slide back to the same report. No, I guess I won't do that. Yes, we'll go right there. This shows another bubble chart where the companies are competing. Lots of people are right on top of one another, and that's not a pleasant place to be, because you're going to see your competitive efforts, the impact of them dulled by the competition directly on top of you. So this is a report that we do want to look at, because it'll help us to visualize how we might move our offerings around to get into a better position. Now I'm going to go back to the previous slide and look at the private label segment. Each round on the right-hand side in the private label segment, there is a set of data. The demand represents the tender offers by some big buyer, and this could be Walmart, it could be Target. They will buy your product, you'll put their label on it, and then they'll mark it up, promote it, but it'll be their distinctive product. Each company has an opportunity to make an offering against that buyer's requirement. And the thing that's sold, it showed to you there, is the amount that was actually sold against that demand. In this particular section, the total demand was 4,350 pairs, or 404 million pairs actually. The amount that was sold was 4,320,000. Now, the reason when so many more pairs were offered is that some of the offering prices were not where the customer was offering prices, and quality were not where the buyer was willing to pay. So up in this slide, up in the upper left-hand corner, I have $60.48. I doubt if you remember it, but that was the average price for wholesale on the preceding, when we looked at the preceding report for comparative competitive efforts. And this represents kind of the idea of where the dealer or the private label buyers are willing to buy product. And they have stated what they're going to use as their maximum offering price. And that is right here. You can see that they are willing to pay up to $50.48 to buy pairs that they can turn around and end up with a total cost, including their advertising and marketing, of somewhere around $60.48. and that they can then sell at a 40% markup from that number to their end user customers. So you can see that people have made offerings because they don't know exactly what their competitors are going to offer in the way of price, nor do they know for sure what that offering price is, the offering buying price is, because that's based on the preceding year 17 wholesale numbers. The private label buyers have to kind of speculate what the numbers are going to look like in year 18, and that's the basis on which they make their offer. There should be, I think it's around a 15% difference between what the current average wholesale price is and what the private label buyer is willing to buy or to pay. So if you have a price that comes in lower than the maximum buying price the private label buyer has, you become eligible as a supplier. And you can see those ranges, those prices range from 32 all the way to the right, all the way up to the highest one looks to be $43. So on a price basis, all of these companies qualify to be in the buyer's area of interest. The SQ rating gives you an idea of what the quality is for the product. And this starts out probably at about a level 3. This is now in year 10. And it works its way up as you improve your product to become more and more competitive. And that you can increase, you can buy, you can invest in SQ quality. That's styling and quality together. That's what those two letters stand for. You can bid your SQ up to as high as 10. It makes no sense to go that high because the incremental perceived value on the part of the customer really isn't that much greater for a Model 8 versus a Model 7. And when you get up to a Model 9, the increment is very, very small. Correspondingly, a Model 7 or an SQ rating of 7 is going to compete very favorably with a 6 and probably with an SQ rating of 5. When you fall down to the lower levels, people just avoid you like the plague. Those are the shoes that will give you plantar fasciitis and other kinds of things and mess up your ankles if you're going to use them for running. Private buyer sets a minimum quality that they're willing to accept, and that quality will move up and down as your wholesale quality moves up and down. In this case, they've said they want to see a minimum quality rating of 5. And if we go across there and looking at each of the offerings from different companies, Company A, you don't have the letters at the top, but it is going to go alphabetically. The first column is column A. They're at a 5. They meet the requirements. Column B, 5.1. They meet the requirements. Column C, even though their price for the shoes is very low, their quality doesn't meet the quality standard, and their bid to sell just got discarded in the waste can. They didn't even open the envelope to see what else was there. Company D, their quality rating was high enough. E, high enough. F, forget it. They're not going to even though, again, the price is extremely low, they're not going to be interested in buying it. Same is true for, let's see that weird, J, Company J, crappy product. Nobody's going to buy it. So the game makes the allocation starting with the company that has the lowest, that has the highest, has a quality rating equal to or greater than the minimum, and then begins fulfilling their purchase order with the highest price or the lowest price available that meets that SQ rating. and then keeps going up. As it exhausts one company, it goes to the next, and that's how they fulfill their orders. Now, this is strictly a whore's market. If you meet the requirements, you get the sale. Nobody hates you if you don't come back and offer something the next year. And there's absolutely no loyalty on the part of the buying company. So just bear that in mind. Now, the SQ rating, I just show this as an example. The SQ rating does not meet the requirements of the buyer, and therefore their product is not even considered. And so they sold nothing. So be aware of that. This is where the place that you use private label product is if you have excess capacity in your factory. It's a good way to fill up that factory, even at very low prices. And you will make money doing that if you have idle capacity. But if you are fulfilling that capacity by reducing your regular capacity, your regular production, therefore selling a lower factory net price, that's a foolish thing to do. So think about private label as selling the extra capacity that is not being used for the orders that you're planning to run for your wholesale customers or your internet customers. I wanted to show you one other thing here. This is going back now. This is company industry 84 in year 17, North America, company A, and that's just the titles at the top of the report. I was extremely interested in the yellow mark at the bottom. Again, that's always the place I start, where company G in this case had a demand for 1,523,000 pairs for their shoes, and they were unable to fulfill a single pair. And that really gets your attention, because what that says is that you somehow got sales orders but didn't have any production at all. And I want to point out here that while they had all that production, or I mean all that demand, of which they filled 0 pairs, they had spent $10 million promoting their product. What a waste of time. And this is something that they should have foreseen and avoided. And this is a dynamic that you need to understand. You have to equipment. Not only do we have to look at the competitive efforts report for all of the sales side and the fulfillment of sales, but we also have to look at the factory. So your fixed assets depreciate very quickly. And you have 2 things that you have to control: the net value of your factory, that's the structure, and the net value of the equipment that is used to build the shoes inside the factory. Each of them has a different depreciation schedule. Factories get depreciated over a longer period of time. Equipment, maybe something like 5 years, and I don't know what it is, but it's in the manual. And usually when we talk about depreciation, you I'm sure are familiar that this is a non-cash charge. It's a set aside to represent the hypothetical reduction in value of the equipment or the structure. And it does not require anyone to write a check. In this case, the game treats physical depreciation as the same as the accounting depreciation. So you buy a car, you drive it off the lot, and they say, well, you just lost 20% of the value of the car. Well, you obviously can drive that and look fine and snappy for at least a year before people are even going to notice that the thing is worth less. In this case, when you have that 20% reduction in the value of the car when it drives off the lot, they do equivalent of a physical depreciation, and the thing is not 80, more than 80% as good as it was one block ago. Once the asset in this game is depreciated, it's physically removed from your factory and you can no longer use it. So this is something that you have to watch. And there are two spaces on a report called facilities and equipment. Now you can see on the navigation page I've pointed to under company operating reports, the facilities and equipment line. If we look at that, we see that the facility space, the top section of the report, deals with the amount of structure you have available. There's only so much equipment you can put into a finite size plant. And this just shows you how much you physically can put in there if you had the equipment. The footwear production report at the bottom, or production equipment rather, at the bottom shows how much capacity and equipment you have. So in this particular case, in looking at North America for a specific company, and this is now company E, and I might add that in the preceding reports that I showed you, the comparative competitive efforts reports, the report is the same. The material that appears in that report is the same for all competitors. When we get down to company operating reports, each company has its own report, and you don't want to have your competitors see what's in that report. That's your proprietary information. Now, in this case, for company E, in North America, they had enough facility space available for 5 million pairs of production. And that was based on a beginning gross investment in facility space. The second, right below the dividing line there, it says $101,500,000 worth of equipment. That's the gross investment, and then or gross value of the structure, and then that is depreciated. In previous years, $29,862,000 had been written off. And in the current year, you expect to write off another 2.5 million. So that the net available space and the quality of the space is worth $69 million. In the second segment, the production equipment is in place is only 250,000 pairs. And that is because the equipment had been depreciated and pulled off the line. So all the equipment that they had left available was to make enough 50,000 pairs, although there was physical space in the facility to make up to 5 million pairs if they had it fully equipped. So if we go down below the little dividing line on the footwear production equipment report, you can see that the, I can't go low enough. The net value for the equipment in this report is 0. And that's why the company, I'm going to go back 2 slides now. The company, let's see. The company ended up with, I'm actually dealing with 2 different industries here, but that was why we saw those big yellow lines, because they had no ability to produce product. And that's something that must be watched very, very carefully. And you have to make equipment buy decisions, particularly equipment buy decisions, to make sure that your equipment will actually work. If you make the buying decision for equipment, the equipment is put in and available from the first day of the current decision period. Now, There's another report called the Operating Statistics Report. And this is part of that same section that we just looked at. It's another report in that suite of reports, but it shows some statistics about the company. And one of the columns in there is called inventory on hand. Now, I'm going to tell you what the answer here is before I look at the report with you. Two companies have 889 days worth of inventory on hand in their warehouse. Your company had 10 days inventory on hand when the game began. So why did this happen, and how can you correct the situation? And how many dollars are tied up in inventory? And extra inventory really represents it's an idle use of cash. You don't have the cash in hand, you've got it in shoes instead. So if we go to the footwear industry reports, one of them is called Financial Statistics, and that's the report we're going to look at here. You can see it's page 5, and this actually gives you two parts. One of them shows the comparative income statement. The second one shows the comparative balance sheet. And this third one, which is the one that I watch closely, is the statistics. And what I look at, and this is the biggest single area that people get into trouble, is how much inventory does the company have at the end of the day. So that's in this column on that report. And the number of days on average is shown. And you can see two companies have almost, let's see, about 2.5 years worth of inventory usage on hand. When you run product, you spend money, you spend cash to pay the workers, to pay for all the materials that are used, to pay for the factory overhead. And that equipment, that finished product is stored in a warehouse, and then it is pulled down. If you're in control of your warehouse and of your production and sales, that number will be small. You can see that right here, there's one company that is managing on the basis of 12 days worth of inventory. That is an extremely good position to be in. Now, if you have too much inventory, you've got there's really only two ways to get rid of it. One, if the amount of overage is relatively small, say if it were between 12 days, the minimum that you'll see on that page, and in fact, the company right below that may have only 5 days, and that's too small. But if you were in the area where you had 10 to 12 days, up to say maybe 30 days worth of inventory, you can always work off that inventory by reducing for the next period by an amount equal to the overage that you've got stored in the warehouse. And that'll just work its way out through the system. See if I can be a little more clear here. If you are carrying 30 days inventory and you want to get that down to 10 days, you want to eliminate 10 days worth of sales, what you'll do is reduce your proposed production by the equivalent of 20 days worth of production. Therefore, you will be short when you do your sales, the equivalent of 20 days sales, and that will absorb out that inventory. If the inventory level gets higher than that, it's up at 50, 100, 200 days, the only option you really have is to do an inventory clearance. And you can specify how bad a hit you're going to take. 25% below your regular costs, 50%, or 75%. My advice is if you're forced to take an inventory write-off, do it quick. Make it steep, solve the problem, and don't have to come back and keep revisiting it. Of course, the thing that you have to do then is to make sure your future production is in line with your future demand and not rebuild the inventory at its still more of the high level. Now, there's one reported here called Industry Overview. Now, we just looked at the report that was on page 5 of this same report. That was the financial statistics. We're now going to look at Industry Overview on page 4. And this is a very interesting report. It tells you what the demand is for branded product and private label for the current year and for the next 2 years. And it's pretty accurate for giving you an idea of where you're going to be a couple years in the future. There are also notes on the page that tell you where you stand, where your company stands in relationship to the industry. So in this report where I've drawn the red lines, the branded demand, first line in the report for global demand is 71,690,000 pairs. And in fact, that's carried down to the supply demand analysis section, the middle part of this report, 71,690. The private label demand, which is the second item on that report, of 8,976,000 is carried down to the supply and demand analysis report, where it's again repeated, 8,976,000. The sum of those two, 80,666,000 pairs, represents the total expected demand for year 13. In this case, we're in year 12 right now, but we're looking forward 1 year to year 13. That's the total expected global demand. And if we go over to the left-hand side, follow that arrow, follow that red line over to the left-hand side, you can see that there was a total industry available inventory of 2,359,000 pairs at the end of year 12, going into year 13. And the total production available, including a 20% overtime factor, was 81 million pairs. So that the total potential global supply, if you've totally sold out everything you could make, physically make, and if you cleaned out your inventory so there was nothing on the floor at all, you would have a total available supply of 83,359,000 pairs. Now, if I look at the analysis on the right-hand side of this, it says currently there is a good balance between potential global supply and projected global footwear demand for the upcoming year. I think that that is showing something where very tight supply, because you must have some inventory, some frictional inventory on hand at all times. If you produce stuff up until the end of shift at say 3:30 in the afternoon, you may not get that production hauled out until the next day, and that production would be hauled out and sent to a warehouse location where it would subsequently be distributed to the retailers or to fulfill internet demand. So that whole 2,359,000 pairs described as beginning inventory is not available for sale. There'll always be a couple million pairs in the system. In addition, there will be times when you can't get full production. So therefore you would get less than 81 million pairs for all the competitors in the industry, all of them presumably working full overtime. That being the case, this says you can move prices up. Now, I had some unusual situations in previous games where the demand actually exceeded, the projected demand actually exceeded the available capacity. And I asked the class, what do you do in this situation? And people didn't know what to do. they said, well, we cut back on production. But the answer, of course, is you take the price up. And you've seen this in the last year with prices on certain commodity items. Right now, of all things, grape nuts, cereal, has escalated in demand in price because there's not enough product available to meet demand for post grape nuts. You saw that happen with toilet paper, with lower and lower quality product that was originally designed for industrial usage is now was being sold in the retail grocery store at a premium price. So you have the opportunity to kick up prices when you see a supply demand imbalance. I want you to just kind of keep that in mind, and that's another report I would look at. It can also tell you, hey, look, we don't need to build any factories because the demand is far lower than the supply. The supply is more than adequate to take care of it. But do read this as a macro kind of analysis of the marketplace. So as I saw it with this report, the capacity is tight. New capacity must be built to meet next year's demands, and that takes time. If there is no new capacity, you'll have to raise prices. And as I indicated verbally before, beginning inventory is product in the warehouse ready to ship. You always have to have some product in there at all times. Now, there are other reports out there, but this is as far as I'm going to go with this slide presentation. There's the footwear industry reports and the company operating reports. You need to print out every report, build a notebook of every report and every decision. This will allow you to be able to have at your fingertips the things that will allow you to make better decisions. So I'm going to leave this presentation right at this point, and I now will be putting it out on Blackboard as a YouTube. And I thank you for indulging my talk here, and I hope this is helpful for you.